You send the text message. Then you watch the three dots appear. Then they disappear. Nothing happens for an hour and your mind will not let it go. You replay the wording. You imagine better versions of what you said. You cannot explain why an unfinished conversation feels heavier than a finished one. But the real answer is far stranger than simple worry. Your brain is not obsessing because it is broken. It is obsessing because, on some level, it thinks the task is still open. In the 1920s, a psychologist named Zeigarnik sat in a crowded Vienna cafe and noticed something odd about the waiters. They could remember a large, complicated order in perfect detail while it was still active. The moment the order was paid and closed, the memory vanished almost instantly. Ask them 10 minutes later what table 6 had ordered, and they would stare back blankly. It was gone. Zeigarnik took this observation into the lab. She had participants complete a series of small tasks, puzzles, simple assignments, and she interrupted half of them before they finished. Later, she asked everyone to recall what they had worked on. The interrupted tasks were remembered nearly twice as often as the completed ones. Your brain, it turns out, treats an unfinished task like an open file. And open files consume power, even when you are not actively using them. This became known as the Zeigarnik effect, and it explains far more of your daily life than you probably realize. That show you haven't finished, that email sitting in your drafts, that argument that ended without resolution. Each one is a small, open loop, quietly humming in the background of your attention. Why would a brain evolve to work this way? Wouldn't it be more efficient to simply forget what isn't urgent? The answer sits far back in your evolutionary past, long before waiters and text messages existed at all. For nearly all of human history, an unfinished task was rarely trivial. An unfinished hunt meant your family did not eat. An unresolved conflict with another member of your group could mean exile, or worse. An unmapped threat, a predator seen once and not accounted for, needed to stay active in memory until it was resolved one way or another. Your ancestors who let go of unfinished business too easily were the ones who got caught off guard. The ones who kept mental tabs open, who stayed a little uneasy until the loop closed, were the ones who survived to pass that trait forward. Regret, in this light, is not a design flaw. It is a warning system that refused to shut off. But here is where the story gets counterintuitive and where a second researcher enters the picture. In the 1990s, psychologist Thomas Gilovich began studying which kinds of regret actually stick with people the longest. His assumption going in was simple. People probably regret their mistakes more than their missed opportunities. A bad decision should sting more than a decision never made. His data told a different story entirely. When Gilovich asked people about regrets from the recent past, they mostly regretted things they had done. Wrong choices, wrong words, actions taken. But when he asked people to reflect on their entire lives, something flipped. The regrets that lingered decades later were almost never about actions taken. They were about actions never taken, the job never applied for, the person never told how they felt, the trip never booked because the timing never felt right. Why would time change what a person regrets? Gilovich's explanation is almost unsettling in its simplicity. A completed action, even a bad one, eventually gets resolved by your brain. You made the mistake, you felt the consequence, the loop closed, however painfully. Your mind can build a story around it and move on. But an action never taken never closes. There is no consequence to process, no ending to file away. Instead, your brain is left to simulate every possible version of what might have happened forever, because there is no real outcome to replace the imagined ones. But the Zeigarnik effect and Gilovich's research on regret describe the same underlying mechanism from two different angles. An open loop stays loud. A closed loop, even a painful one, eventually goes quiet. This is why heartbreak from a rejection tends to fade faster than heartbreak from a love never confessed. This is why a failed business often haunts a founder less than the business idea they never tried. Your brain isn't punishing you for the outcome. It's punishing you for the absence of one. Consider what this means for something as small as a cliffhanger in a television show. Writers have understood this instinct for decades, long before anyone had a name for it. End an episode on an unresolved question, and viewers will return almost involuntarily, not because they are especially disciplined fans, But because an open loop generates its own gravity, marketers exploit the identical principle. A countdown timer, a limited time offer, a progress bar showing your profile is only 80% complete. None of these tricks work because you are careless or gullible. They work because your brain is doing exactly what evolution built it to do 100,000 years ago. It sees an incomplete pattern and refuses to look away. Here is the part that should genuinely surprise you. This ancient mechanism, built for tracking unfinished hunts and unresolved threats, is now running almost constantly in a modern world engineered to never let it rest. Unread notifications, unanswered messages, half-finished shows across 4 different streaming platforms. Your ancestors closed their open loops within days, sometimes within hours. You are carrying dozens of them at once, some for years, and your nervous system was never built for that kind of load. It is not that you have become more anxious than previous generations, it is that you were handed an ancient alarm system and then placed inside an environment custom-built to keep triggering it forever, without end. So what do you actually do with an alarm that never stops ringing? Zeigarnik's own later research offers a strange kind of relief. In follow-up studies, she found that the tension of an unfinished task could be resolved almost as effectively by making a concrete plan to finish it as by actually finishing it. Participants who simply wrote down when and how they would complete an interrupted task showed the same drop in mental tension as participants who completed the task outright. Your brain, in other words, does not need the loop closed. It needs to believe the loop has a plan. That single finding quietly reframes what regret actually is. Regret is not a punishment for failure. It is your mind's request for a plan it does not yet have. This changes how you might look at your own unfinished business. The apology you keep meaning to send. The skill you started learning and abandoned. The relationship you let fade out instead of ending clearly. None of these need to be resolved by tomorrow. But your mind may finally quiet down the moment you give it something more specific than good intentions, a real time, a real next step, a plan concrete enough for the alarm to accept as an answer. Gilovich's later work adds one more layer worth sitting with. When he asked people what they would tell their younger selves about regret, almost none of them said, "Be more careful." Almost all of them said, "Be more willing." Not because risk stops hurting when it fails. It hurts plenty. But because a taken risk eventually resolves, one way or another, and resolved pain fades. An untaken risk never resolves at all. It just keeps generating new imagined outcomes indefinitely, decade after decade, a loop with no ending because it was never given a middle. So the next time you find yourself staring at 3 dots that appeared and disappeared, or replaying a conversation that ended without closure, remember what Bluma Zeigarnik saw in that Vienna cafe nearly a century ago. Your mind is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was built to do, holding a door open because somewhere, deep in its evolutionary wiring, it still believes an open door might get you killed if you let it close too soon. You send the text message. This time, whatever the reply, you already know why you cannot look away.